Hi guys, it's Geekonomics here once again, bringing you the next video in this series with regard to budget lines and indifference curves. Page 11 of the OCR A2 textbook. So this follows straight on from the diagram which I have previously looked at in the previous video, where we had a substitution effect A to B, an income effect B to C, both of them reinforcing one another, and ultimately we end up consuming less of both goods. This particular diagram is slightly different in that we're still considering the impact of a price change, that price change being an increase in the price of apples. However, we're also considering the increase in the price of apples when apples are an inferior good. So let's remind ourselves, inferior goods. Inferior goods are goods which consumers will buy less of if their income goes up, or if the price rises, as is the case here, they will consume more of them. So rather than consuming less of them, which the normal law of demand would suggest, they would consume more of them. So let's have a little look at this particular diagram. So it's cola and apples once again, ladies and gentlemen. Our pivot point is again around this point here, because it is the price of apples which are changing, not the price of cola. And as you know, if the price of apples were to fall, the budget line, the BLs here, would be moving outwards. They'd be pivoting around this point, moving outwards this way. But in this instance, the price of apples are rising, our pivot point is here, and so BL0 pivots through to BL1. Our start point A is pretty much identical to our start point A on this particular diagram. So you can see here that we're on indifference curve 2 on our original income and budget line of BL0. And so the utility that this particular individual derives is this combination of cola and apples. Put the points on if you want, this combination of cola and apples. We are saying here that the price of apples rises. And so ultimately we're going to move from A to point C. We're going to land on point C, but it's how we get to point C which is the important point here, and the mechanics behind it are important. So you can see I have drawn, ladies and gentlemen, for you once again, I've drawn this thick redder line here, the BL asterisk, which you'll know I referred to in the previous diagram as the compensated indifference curve. I think that's a nice term for it because it does help to explain what it's trying to show. So let's remind ourselves, what is it actually trying to show? Well, it's showing us, number one, the new ratio of prices. How do we know it's showing us the new ratio of prices? Because the gradient of the red line is now the same as this new budget line once the price of apples has risen and kicked in. Once that is kicked in, and we've now moved from this shallow curve to this steeper curve, and this budget line, the compensated budget line, is also the same gradient. And so it's showing us at this new price ratio, if we still wanted to enjoy the same utility or satisfaction as we did at point A, and we had sufficient income to be purchasing combinations of apples and cola at the new price ratios, then we could get onto this indifference curve 2 by consuming at point B. Now you'll know that a consumer is indifferent between choices along this indifference curve. They're not bothered whether they're A or C or D or E or B. As long as they're on it, they're deriving the same amount of utility or satisfaction. And so point B would get the same utility as point A. However, nota bene, ladies and gentlemen, note well what's happened. In order to get to B, the consumer has had to do two things. Number one, they have sacrificed apples. So they've given up some apples. Now you would expect that, you would anticipate that, because the price of apples have gone up. And they have obviously consumed more more cola, because they've gone upwards from A to B. So there's more cola being consumed. So again, the substitution effect is very much consume fewer apples, consume more cola. So we're substituting cola for the more expensive apples. And hence we get this negative substitution effect from A to B. This is where things change from our previous diagram, where we had, I'll just bring that up again, where we moved from B to C, because we were assuming that apples in this instance were a normal good. Now we're assuming that the apples in this instance are an inferior good. And we said that an inferior good was one after which the price has gone up, you consume more of it. And so you can see here we've got a slightly positive income effect, as the consumer is preferring to consume a few more units of apples. So we've gone A to B substitution effect, highly negative, but we've got a slightly positive income effect, in that because apples are an inferior good, even though the price has gone up, the income effect is still slightly positive. And so we end up moving then from B to C. Now obviously that slightly positive income effect is not sufficient to move us away over here, where it would totally outweigh that very negative substitution effect. The net effect is still that we're consuming less. You can see here that as we move from point A to point C, yes, we're consuming slightly more apples compared to point B, but obviously in the grand scheme of things, when we move from point A to point C, we are consuming, as you can obviously see, that was our original combination, that was our new combination, so we're consuming less of both goods. So the net effect is still the same as in our previous diagram, but the mechanics of how we get there and exactly the point at which we're at is slightly different. Okay, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be back with another one of these very shortly.